Hi there, welcome back to the Barnsley Biker Video Diary and to another edition of Tales from the Showroom Floor. I think this is episode 4 now, which I've called Stop Thief. And I suppose the inspiration, for want of a better word, behind this episode is the proliferation of news stories at the moment about shoplifting and the effect it's having on retail, the cost to the retail industry, but also the rise of organised gangs targeting various stores for high-end, high-value items. And it got me thinking about some of the incidents that I was privy to while I was working in the industry. The ones I'm going to talk about all took place at Doncaster and ranged from everything from a simple smash and grab raid, if you like, where a window was broken and a helmet taken from a shelf in the middle of the night, right through to credit card fraud. We had finance fraud. We even had an incident that I was involved with, international banking fraud, a bike bought using bank transfer, which had been done through a sequence of banks, and turned out, to be a scam at the end of the day. We eventually got that bike back, but I'll leave that story for another day. But the incidents that I was going to talk about are more around shoplifting at the showroom sites that I worked at, and there's 3 or 4. I mean, there's one that has now become urban myth, urban legend in the Doncaster area, and I'll tell you about that one last. I'll leave that one till last. But the ones that came to mind when I was thinking about what to talk about in this episode. The first one always makes me smile, just because I remember the chap involved, the thief, absolutely sweating his whatsits off. It was a hot summer's day. A lot of my stories seem to be on a hot summer's day, but this one, it definitely was one of the hottest days of the year, middle of the summer. It was one of those days where customers that hadn't come on a bike, they were walking around the showroom in shorts and t-shirt, flip-flops, and people that were on bikes were wearing the very basic, the minimum of clothing, shall we say. So this guy stuck out like a sore thumb. We'll say that again. So this guy stood out like a sore thumb when he came into the showroom, mainly because he was wearing one of those parkers, fishtail parkers that come down to the back of your calves, and it was zipped all the way up to his chin. So obviously, straight away arousing suspicion when he's coming to the showroom on a hot summer's day, dressed for winter almost. I think he got a pair of jogging bottoms on under the parker. And he went into the clothing department. Now, it's a busy day. It was a weekend again. But he's aroused suspicion, so everybody's trying to keep an eye on him, so watching where he's going and what he's doing. But at some point, he'd managed to evade everybody's attention and obviously had slipped into the changing room. The next time that he was seen, he's starting to make his way slowly, trying not to arouse suspicion, which is difficult when you're wearing a parka on a hot summer's day. But he's starting to make his way out of the clothing department, which at the time was at the back of the store. I mean, the clothing department was the size of some supermarkets. It was a big area at the time, and we had a massive range of clothing back then. We were one of the first in the area to be agents for Dainese and Alpine Star, and also had a massive selection on the shelves. So he's making his way out of the clothing department. To get out of the showroom, he had to come out of the clothing department into the motorcycle display area, and he came down the steps out of clothing. He's again, we've got eyes on him, and he's being tracked by a couple of guys from the clothing department. Not quite sure what he's up to. He starts making his way through the motorcycles, Again, a couple of the bike salespeople have become aware that there's something going off. At that time, we had security tags on the clothing, and we had one of those like security gates that you walk through, like where there's a barrier on either side, and it triggers an alarm if you walk between the two barrier posts or whatever you call them. So he's walking towards the exit, and lo and behold, he gets to the exit and the alarm starts going off. There's a salesman stood just outside the door. He's positioned, he's realised what's happening, and he's positioned himself there. The guy tries to get around him or whatever, but he blocks, this salesman blocks his exit, and by which time this thief is surrounded by 3-4 salespeople with nowhere to go. We escort him to one of the officers under protest. He's denying that he's done anything wrong. Now it's quite obvious. He came in and he was a tall, quite skinny guy. He's walking out of the showroom. He looks like he's put on 3 or 4 stone. So he's obviously trying to hide something underneath this coat that he's wearing. Anyway, we get him in the office and we ask him, you know, a few questions. You've obviously either got something you've not paid for, or we've forgotten to take the tag off something or whatever. And he's like, not bought anything. No, I've not got anything. Saying very little, but you know, trying to deny any involvement in anything wrong, any wrongdoing. Refused to open his coat, and it's zipped right up to his chin. It's right up. Refusing to open his coat, refusing to take it off. We've got him in an office, so we keep him in the office. We phone the police. We keep him in the office with a salesman keeping an eye on him, the door shut. I already said it's a hot summer's day, and the sales officers that we had back then literally were like greenhouses. There was a desk inside a glass cube almost, or on 3 sides it was glass. There was a row of 3 officers, and you could see through all 3 because there were glass on all 3 sides out of the 4. So they got very warm, especially with the door closed on a hot summer's day. And this guy stood in the corner of the office, and sweat is running down his face as he gets hotter and hotter and hotter. And we're like, take your coat off. No, refused. Anyway, eventually the police turn up. Didn't take too long. And they start to question him in the office. They obviously persuade him that he is going to unzip his coat. And eventually he has to do so. So he unzips his coat. Underneath this coat, and obviously he's put his jogging bottoms over the top as well, he's wearing a one-piece Danish suit, which is why he's put on the 3 or 4 stone. Obviously it looks like he's been at the gym in between coming into the shop and going back out. He was led out of the showroom in handcuffs. I think we eventually got the suit back, but obviously the police kept that as part of their evidence for their inquiries. Don't remember the outcome, but I think he was known to the police. He was a regular shoplifter. But yeah, it's just the image of him stood in the corner of the office, refusing to take his coat off in the first instance, and the sweat just pouring down his face as he got hotter and hotter. I mean, parkas are hot, but parka over a one-piece racing suit, yeah, you're going to be sweating. You're going to feel that, aren't you? So, but that also reminded me of another instance where we had a group of lads, 4 or 5 lads, turned up on sports bikes, all in the one-piece full Power Rangers outfits, helmets, etc. Came into the showroom all full of the joys of just having quite a spirited ride, I'm guessing. And they came into the showroom, and as they came through the security barrier, they set the alarm off, which got them all a little bit, well, what, like they're all looking around like who's doing it. And obviously they were the only ones anywhere near the door. So they then turned it into a little bit of a game to see who it was that was setting the alarm going. And it turned out it was just one guy in particular. Every time he went through the barriers, the alarm went off. So we obviously had been alerted to the fact that the alarm had been triggered, and we're all like, what's going off? And we went to have a chat with him. Now at that time, because we'd had quite a few thefts, and it was we'd obviously got people that were coming to the showroom equipped with wire cutters, pliers or whatever, and we'd find security tags in the changing rooms and in the toilets on fairly frequent occasions. So we were being targeted at the time. So what we'd started doing, especially with the leathers, 1 and 2 piece leathers, was there'd be an obvious security tag on the cuff or whatever. But as you're probably aware, most leathers have pockets that you can put the armour in and take it out, so you can change it if you need to, or adjust it. So we were putting security tags inside the pockets where the armour fits on the more expensive items. So a belt and braces approach, as opposed to having things stolen. We took this guy on one side and we had a chat with him, and we asked if he'd let it take the suit off, and lo and behold, we found one of his security tags. I think it was in the pocket for the knee armour. Excuse me. So we found it, and we quizzed him, had he bought it from us recently, because our suspicion was initially that he'd bought it from us, we'd taken one security tag off, but we'd forgotten to take the other one. Turns out he'd bought the suit off one of these notice boards at a local biker hangout where you could buy and sell items, put them up for sale, and he'd seen this Danish suit advertised on the notice board, less than half price and brand new. And literally it still looked brand new, he'd not had it that long. So on this occasion, obviously, he seems to be the innocent party, if you know, we believe his story as such. So we asked if he'd mind leaving his details so we could take it up with the police. He was a bit worried, obviously, but also details of where he bought the suit from. And all he had was a contact name and a phone number. Whether the name was legitimate or not, I don't know. Which we passed on to the police and raised an incident report with the police, and let him go on his way, because at that moment in time we'd no right to keep the suit, and we'd no right to do anything against the actual guy. He'd been fairly straight with us. And again, I think it was one of those where nothing ever really came of it, other than there was something on file down at the local police station. But yeah, I say the first incident reminded me of the second one, the guy that got caught coming back into the showroom with potentially stolen goods. But yeah, I mean, shoplifting at that time, because as the companies, as we expanded and opened up more and more stores, we also expanded and took a fresh look at how we approach motorcycle sales and clothing and accessories sales, and we became mini superstores for clothing and accessories on most of our sites, with some of the biggest ranges of helmets, waterproofs, leathers, 1-piece, 2-piece boots, you name it. We probably had the biggest selection that you'd in all of our stores that you'd find anywhere in the country. So, and at that time, I think we were probably making more money, like net profit wise, on the clothing and accessories than we were from selling new bikes. Used bikes were always profitable, but new bikes, it's always a challenge to make a living out of new bikes. I might do a separate video on that at some point, because people have asked me a few questions around about that. But clothing was very profitable, so obviously we were taking security very seriously at the time, and were being targeted. So yeah, but those are a couple of the incidents that are stored in my memory bank, shall we say. But we weren't immune from having bikes stolen either. At Doncaster, we were fortunate in that one of the incidents I'm going to talk about was probably as close as it came to violence as far as theft goes. We did have a few other incidents, but as far as somebody attempting to steal something and it getting violent, as far as that goes, I think this incident was as close as we got at Doncaster. Although on some of our sites we had staff threatened with knives, with machetes, even firearms at one of our locations. So yeah, things could get fairly hairy for staff at the time. But yeah, I think this was a time when we occupied the whole of the Marshgate site. Previously, Marshgate had been shared, bike showroom at one end, and then the bigger part of the showroom had been cars. But by now, we were occupying the whole of the site. Around the back of the showroom was a fenced compound with a double gate at one end and a pedestrian gate at the other end. We didn't store much in there, staff parked the cars in there, etc. But back in the day, it had been used to park new cars waiting to go on display or waiting to go to customers. Anyway, there was an external tap in this compound behind the showroom, which we used to connect our jet wash to for rinsing off used bikes, new bikes, cleaning anything that was going to be going on display in the showroom, but also bikes that we weren't going to resell that we'd taken in part exchange. Generally speaking, we'd already have a buyer for them. We'd get them underwritten when we were doing the deal, but to make sure that there was no, shall we say, further negotiation when the underwriter came to pick the bike up, and very rarely there was, but we used to make sure that the bikes, the used bikes that we weren't retailing, were presented in the best possible light. And on this occasion, we'd taken in a motocrosser. I think it was a Honda 250, CR250 motocrosser, which we weren't going to retail. We got an underwrite on it. We were giving it a rinse off. I mean, it was in fairly mint condition, if I remember rightly, but we were rinsing it off so that we could then phone the people that had underwritten it to come and collect it. Say, your bike's here, come and give us your money. Anyway, at the time, the lad, he was our valeter, van driver, odd job man, basically. Good lad, and I think he still works at Doncaster, if I'm honest. But he was in the compound on his own, hosing this bike off with the jet wash. And he says at the time he hadn't noticed until afterwards, and then the penny dropped. But a white van had probably gone round 2 or 3 times while he was rinsing this bike off, and he'd reached a point where he'd done what he was doing, and I think he'd turned around to go and turn the tap off, and he'd turned his back on the bike. At this point, the guys in the van had taken the opportunity to come out, leap out the van, and they were pushing the bike out of the compound. Back doors of the van open already. Obviously, they knew what they were doing. He went running, making as much noise as he could to try and alert. Now, around the back of the building, it was very rare that you'd see anybody at this time. But he was making as much noise, trying to attract attention and maybe scare these guys off from carrying on with what they were doing. They carried on, literally trying to get it on the van before he could get to them. So they're pushing the bike, the van doors are open. Instead of trying to tackle the 2 guys that are pushing the bike, he went for the driver, opened the driver's door and tried to either wrestle the keys out of the ignition or wrestle the driver out of the driving seat. So a bit of a scuffle ensued, and unfortunately the guy, our guy, ended up on the floor, and they managed to get the bike in and fled the scene. He got a few details, and it was passed on to the police. But again, I think it was one of those, yeah, we give them the information, it was a stolen van or false plates or whatever. We got security camera footage, because there were security cameras around the back of the building. Never got the bike back, never saw anything. So yeah, on that occasion they got away with it. Wasn't the first time we'd had guys turn up in a van and try and walk off with a bike, to be honest. We did try and take precautions. I mean, at the time, and in fact most of the time that I was working at Doncaster, there's a raised parapet around the showroom which we used to display bikes on, especially small 125 trail bikes, that sort of thing. And we pushed them out in the morning, put them on display, but we also had a cable through the wheels and a lock on, obviously to discourage anybody that decided just to walk away with one. But there was a lot of bikes coming and going all the time, bikes coming across from the warehouse where they were stored or built, bikes coming round from the workshop because they were going to go into the showroom and wait for the customer picking them up, bikes coming around from the workshop because the customer was coming to pick them up that day. And on at least one other occasion, and it was myself on this occasion, a customer came in and said, "Did you know there's a van outside and there's 2 guys trying to push a bike into the back of it?" And they'd parked on the front of the showroom, which was unusual because most customers that had turned up in a van, and it did happen, to take the bike away, parked directly outside the showroom doors, which was the side of the building, if you like. And these guys had parked on the front, where sort of out of sight a little bit. So I clocked them, and I went running out, and I was followed by a few other guys. and they were still in the process of opening the back doors on their van and getting the plank out, and they'd parked the bike on the side stand. As soon as they saw that they'd been rumbled, literally they were in the van and gone. So on that occasion, yeah, we managed to stop them getting away with the bike. But yeah, there were several occasions where there were attempts with people just to walk off with the bike. But that sort of brings me on. As far as I'm aware, we didn't have many bikes actually stolen from the site. But that leads me on to the one that I mentioned, the urban myth. The one that's gone into legend in Doncaster area, and people still talk about it. And if I'm being really, really honest, I've no evidence as to whether it's true or it's just a story that started circulating and is literally a myth, and there's no truth behind it at all. But it was on one of those occasions. I wasn't actually working at Doncaster at the time. I came back and heard the story from guys that worked there, and from customers, to be fair. Towards the end of my career with the company, because of my experience, etc., I used to get sent to work at other branches and sort of caretaker manage branches where we'd got staff issues or whatever. So I think at this time I was working at one of the other branches. But it was during the period where Doncaster, we had the main showroom, and then across the ways there was a large warehouse, and behind the warehouse a large compound. Now the warehouse was set way back from the road and was surrounded by an 8-foot chain link fence, and then another internal 8-foot chain link fence around most of the compound. And on two sides it was surrounded by water and a steep bank, because we had a river running along the back of the compound, and then the canal running down the other side of the compound. So fairly secure. To get in there, you'd have to be very, very brave or very, very foolish not to get caught. It was a time when we were selling a lot of bikes, and Doncaster was the warehouse, if you like, for all of the company, because a lot of sites didn't have a lot of storage space. Some did, but most didn't. So we would store bikes in crates as they came from the manufacturer. And at the time, and still today to an extent, new machines, they will come on an oblong metal pallet specifically built for whichever bike that is designed to go in it. That pallet will have a lighter weight metal framework around it, and then be covered by a large cardboard box, literally a cardboard lid that goes over the top of it to protect it from the worst of the weather. And these crates could be stored, I mean the recommendation was store them no more than 3 high, stacking them up. And on occasions we actually stacked them 4 high. And it was a time when we may have 300-400 bikes in crates behind the warehouse, just waiting to be either built and sent out as built bikes to the other stores, or to be put on a truck to go out in the crate to the other stores where they'd build them up, depending on what facilities they had. And it turns out there was a local gang, for want of a better word, had this idea that they could get one of these crates over the fence and have it away down the river. And the urban legend, the urban myth is that they turned up at night, obviously under cover of darkness. They managed to get a crate with a Honda Fireblade in it, the story is always a Honda Fireblade, over the fence somehow, down the steep banking. And the banking was at 45 degree at best, if not more, banking. So it's a very steep banking. But apparently they'd put together a raft to put this crated bike onto the raft. And the plan was to float it down the river to somewhere where they could get it off and get away with it. Now, near Doncaster, there's a little nature reserve, beauty spot, want of a better word, called Sprotborough Falls. And allegedly, they managed to get the bike out of the compound. They got it onto the raft somehow. I have no idea how. And they were floating it away down the river, and at some point between the back of the compound and Sprockborough Falls, the bike slipped off the raft and sank to the bottom of the river. Nobody's ever recovered the bike, to my knowledge, to confirm whether or not the story is true. So if you're into magnet fishing, yeah, get yourself down somewhere between Marshgate, Doncaster and Sprockborough Falls and see if you can find a Fireblade, because if the story's true, allegedly it's still there at the bottom of the river somewhere, sat in its crate, a brand new Fireblade. Probably not much use to anybody these days, but yeah, it's a story that I hear even to this day by people repeating it that don't even know I ever worked in the trade, never mind worked at the company where it's supposed to have happened. But allegedly they tried to steal a bike by floating it down the river. So yeah, one of the more amusing stories. One day maybe we'll find out whether or not it's true. Okay, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, please watch the next one, where I have an idea of what the next one's going to be about. Probably we're thinking about doing some videos along the theme of, well, we're going to call them trade talk. So I've got contacts in the trade still, and I was going to have chats with people in the trade to get the industry's take on the future of motorcycling in this country, shall we say, as a bit of a follow-on from my motorcycle show video and my classic bike crisis video, I suppose. So look out for that one. But as always, please like, please subscribe, and until next time, I will see thee.